In today's Python Pandas video, we're going to be taking a look at how you can handle null values within your data. And we're going to go through a ton of different examples, starting off with how you can identify null values. We're going to look at filtering with null values, how you can replace the null values, remove rows or columns, and much more. A ton to cover in this episode. And if you aren't familiar with essentially what a null value is, this is when data is going to be missing, which in practice you don't see that often, but when you work with real world data, data is very messy and you will deal with null values all the time. And if you jump into Kaggle projects, they're there as well. So really important topic for you guys, and let's jump right into it. All right, let's get started. What we're going to do is import in pandas and numpy. So pandas as pd, import the numpy as np. I'm going to use numpy for null values. You don't necessarily need to know how numpy works for this video. So we'll have that over here. It'll take a second to run. Also, I'm going to build out my data frame. We're going to use, I believe, a few different data frames throughout this video, but what I'm going to do first is pass in a dictionary called data. And what this has is different bands and also how many tickets they sold for a concert, right? So like the Who, All Them Witches, and Goose. And yeah, we'll have different integers over here. np.nan is for null values. And if you want to grab all this code, it is on my website. Link is going to be down below in the description. One line of code to turn this into a data frame. So just df equals pd.dataframe, and just pass in data over here, and we're good to go. And just to show you what this looks like really fast, just do df, and you can see we have columns of the different bands, and then over here, the tickets sold. All right, so what we're going to do is take a look at our first example. And we'll jump right in here and we'll say example 1. And what we're going to do is just check for missing values, right? One of the first things that I like to do when I take a look at a data set for the first time. So there's two different approaches you can do. You can do your entire data frame at once, or you can go column by column. Let's take a look at an example of just going for a column. So let's take a look at the Who, and we'll say .isnull. So isnull like that. And you'll see that we have 2 trues and 2 falses. And you can see over here, true and true is for these over here, which are nans, which are null values. And then our falses are these over here, which do have specific values, right? And then what we can do too is just take a look at everything in the data frame. So we can just go down over here, just take a look at this at once. And you can see, again, it populates false if there's a value there, true if it is null. Now, another way that you could do this, and it has the same exact functionality, and you'll sometimes see this, is NA. So example 2 is NA. So let's jump right through that. Literally, we're going to use the same code just to show you that these are identical. I'll just go over here and grab this as well. And all we're going to do is change this to is NA. So that way you guys don't get confused if you see is null or is NA, right? So same exact results across the board. Some people prefer is null, some people prefer is NA. Honestly, I don't really have a preference. Now the opposite is going to be not NA. So we'll go over here to example 3. So example 3, which is not NA. And you can just go over here and say df.not NA. I'm not going to go through everything on that, but you can see it's the opposite, right? So we have false, true, false, true, false, true, 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 right? And this just looks for values. So complete opposite, right? Whether you want to use is NA or not NA. And also to show you guys this as well, you could use not null, right? So not NA, I should say, and not null for this example, but I'm going to put this into the website after, but you can also use that, right? So these are going to be identical. And again, you could go down to columns if you want, but these are the opposites. All right, so what I want to do now is count the missing values. So that's going to be our fourth example, right? Example 4, count missing values. And what we can do over here is say df.isnull, and then just sum it. So we can just go over here and say sum. And this will tell you exactly how many missing values are per column. So you can see the Who is missing 2, All Them Witches is missing 1, and Goose is missing nothing over here. Again, you could do this per column if you really wanted to. So you can just go over here and say the who. Great. And grab that too. And you can see it says int 64 being 2. There's 2 specific rows that have null values on there. Another way you could quickly identify null values is using info. So we'll say example 5, which is info over here. And I use this a lot when I first take a look at a data set. So you can just do over here info. And you can see it says non-null count, right? 2 non-null, 3 non-null, 4 non-null. And the fact that these are different tells me right away that there is some null values associated with it, right? We jump into our next example over here, which is size versus value counts. This is important to grasp. So say size versus value counts. And here's the thing, right? Size includes null values, whereas count does not include null values. So if I go over here, and we'll use the who column, for example. So let's specify the who. Let me go over here to counts, right? It's going to tell us over here that we have 2, right? If we go into size, it's going to tell us we have 4, right? So count does not include null values. Size does include null values. Sometimes you'll see this asked on interview type questions with pandas. So just something you can quickly pick up. Let's go over filtering. So example 7 is going to be filtering based on null values. And we'll go through a few different examples of that. We'll start off with some basic filtering. So we'll say filtered DataFrame equals, and inside over here we'll say df all them whiches, and then I can just put not na. So what this will return is all the rows where all them whiches is not null. And actually what I did over here is I made one typo. So this should have the other bracket right there. Let's take a look at that. So that you can see if we go to our new filter data frame, right? It's going to be 3 rows right now, and all of which has values associated with it. What I want to show you now is filtering based on null values, with one being not null. So we'll just say filtering based on null values in only one column. I will take you through a few different examples, right? So let's say we're going over here, we'll say df, and we're going to filter on multiple conditions. I believe this will be after that video in this series. If not, what you need to know if you're looking at filtering multiple conditions, make sure that they're in parentheses for each of them. Or if this is the first time that you're filtering multiple conditions, make sure that you put parentheses around each one. So we're going to go in here and say df the who, and we're going to say dot isna, and we're going to have and we're going to say over here df all them whiches is not null, but not an a, right? So this will populate any row where the who is null, right, and all them whiches is not null. So we only get one result back on that side of things. Let's take a look at an example with an or statement. So we go over here and we'll have an or statement, which is just a pipe over here. We'll keep the first half the same. We'll grab when the who is an a, and then we'll use goose because we haven't used them at all in this episode. And we'll say goose is less than 5,000, right? There's so many different ways that you could filter, even just based off this very basic data set that I generated over here. But you can see over here, right? The who is an a, or the goose, and I should say 5,000, but that's what the code I prepped earlier. And you can see goose 3,200 shows over here as well. So this is or, one of those 2 conditions has to be met. This technically meets both. If we just put this to and, that column will showcase, whereas this one will not. All right, now let's go over sorting. So we'll say example 9, sorting with null values. Example 9, sorting with null values. And let's take a look at that. So what we can go over here is df.sort values. And when we sort, we have to specify a column we want to sort by. Let's say we want to sort by who ticket sales, right? We want the highest at the top. So we'll say by equals the who, right? So the who. And then what you can do is actually specify where you want the null values to be without imputing your null values. Imputing means like giving it a specific value, right? So what I can say is NA position, and let's say I want to have the null values at the very top, right? And also to mention, when you sort in Python Pandas, it's ascending by default. All right, so we have NA position over here, and you can see we have the null values at the top, and then it grows larger, right? We can also do the opposite. So we can still sort by the who. What I'll put over here is ascending equals false, and then we'll pay NA position to last, right? And now you can see we have the null values here at the bottom. We have the largest here, second largest, and then into the null values. All right, what we're gonna do next is remove any row with at least one null value. So now we're gonna talk about a little bit more data cleanup side of things. So example 10, remove row with null value. And here's how you could do that. I'm just gonna create a new data frame, remove row, and we'll just say df.drop NA, right? So this will just remove any type of row that has a null value in it at all. And just to show you what this looks like, we go over here, right? And you can see we only have 2 rows. And just going back up over here, right? You can see that this has a null value, so this row is gone, and this has a null value, so that row is gone. So we just have those 2. All right, I'm gonna scroll back down, and let's expand on this. And we can also add in additional criteria. So for this next one, right, we can say remove row where at least 2 columns have null value. So at least 2 null values. And how we can do that is a parameter called thresh. So we can just go over here. We'll call this df removed 2, remove row 2, and we'll say thresh equals 2. So thresh equals 2, right? And now we should have 1 row back, right? So this one over here should be back because we have a value for all them witches. But the 1 row that has the who and all them witches being null is now going to be gone. We could also take a look at removing columns. And this should be what, example 11. And I will say, I try to keep these examples the same as the article. Some of these articles will expand over time, depending when you watch the video, but should be pretty close. So we'll say example 12 removes any column on here with null values. And all you got to do on this side of things is use your axis. So we'll just say over here, df remove column equals df.drop NA. We'll just put axis equals 1, right? And we should only have 1 column and over here now. And you can see that is going to be goose, which has all of its values over here. All right, so what happens if you don't want to drop specifically a row or a column and you just want to start filling in information? There's quite a few different ways that you could approach this. So we're going to cover a lot of those right now. So we're going to start off with some very basic examples. So example 13, fill with a specific value. So fill with specific value. And in particular, we're going to start off with an integer. So we'll just go over here and say df filled equals df.fill NA. Let's put in 0, right? We just don't know how many tickets were sold. And we go over here and you can see the value now is 0 for the who and all of them witches. What I want to show you now is you can also use strings. So example 14, fill with strings. Now, here's the deal. All this over here, right? All integers. So I'm gonna have to create a new data frame off of this. So I'll show you what I'm gonna build out. So I just have a venue list over here, right? St. Augustine Amphitheater and Hard Rock Orlando, 2 venues that I frequent for live music, and some of the artists that I've seen over there, right? So Billy Strings, we'll say this is a null value, The Smile, Gojira, Mastodon, Hard Rock Orlando, Sitting Color, Toto, Mastodon, another null value in Dream Theater. So we'll have that over here for our venue list, and then we'll just generate a data frame, right? So we'll say venue df equals pd.dataframe and just pass in this venue. I know it's called venue list. It's really a dictionary, but it's fine. A little typo on my part. And regardless, what we'll do over here is just take a look what this is over here. And you can see St. Augustine Amp and then the Hard Rock Orlando. So what I want to do is just create a new data frame called df_filled2. df_filled2 equals, and then we'll say venue df.fill na, and we'll just put over here unknown band because we don't know who played. Maybe it's an opener that I wasn't too familiar with before jumping into the show. Although I typically try to see openers if they have decent music. So you can see over here df filled 2, and you can see, right, unknown band and unknown band. All right, now we're going to cover a concept called forward and backward fills. We'll be utilizing this a little bit later in another video, actually. So 15 is going to be forward fill, and then 16 is backward fill. So example 15, forward fill. Right. And where we'll be utilizing this a little bit later is when we jump into window functions within Python Pandas. Specifically, after I prepped this video, I started working on rolling. So I actually use this in rolling as well. These will be later videos in this series, by the way. All right, and what we'll say is df forward fill, so equals df.fill, like this over here. The syntax has changed over time on how you want to fill specifically within the data frame. This, I believe, is the most up-to-date. If it does change, I will update the article here in the future, so just let us know. So there's that side of things, right? So we do a forward fill, and if you take a look at what this looks like now, right? So you can see the who had a value over here of 25,000, and the next one is going to be 25,000 as well. But this first row over here has null values because there's nothing before it, right? It has index of 0. We just don't know what the values are. So we could use a backwards fill to actually fill those out specifically, right? Whereas the forward fill filled that. If we do a backwards fill, right, this value over here, which was null, would be 42,000. We grab the value from the index later and then apply it over here. So that would be 42,000. This null value would be 25,000. This one would be 1,500. So let's jump through that. We'll say backwards fill. Backwards fill. And again, it's going to be very similar, right? Instead of F over here for forward fill, we're just going to say BF. So that's, and you'll see all these values should be in here now because there's always something after it. So you can see 25,000, right? 1,500, and this has 42,000. So two different approaches that you could take, again, to fill in values. Another one that we could do is this by specifically group by. So that's another common approach of using backwards and forward fill. I should also say this is example 16. All right, so let's say example 17, group by. And again, we're just going to generate a brand new table. And over here, or brand new data frame, we have DF baseball with a data frame inside over here, right? We have different teams, Yankees and Dodgers, and the batting average and some null values over here, right? So what we can do on here is just say DF baseball, and let's just say our batting average over here. So we'll say batting average, right? Let's go over here to say equals DF baseball dot group by, and we'll just pass in team, right? We're going to group by the team, and we're going to fill in the batting average. So batting average, and then just put your fill. In this case, I'm going to put a forward fill, right? And that's going to be over here. And then if we take a look at this now, all the values should be in here. If we go to DF baseball, and you can see now all of our values are present on this side of things. Okay, so we've covered a lot so far. I was debating whether to put this a little bit earlier in the tutorial or not, but it's also very common to fill with statistics. So we'll go to example 18, fill with statistics. And probably the most common ones that I see used is mean or median. So what I'll do over here is just make a copy of our data frame. So we'll say df fill na equals df.copy, right? So it's the same exact data, we'll just populate it over here. And then what we'll do on this side of things is fill in the who and also fill in all them whiches with two different approaches. So what we'll start off with is df fill na the who, then we'll grab the who, so the who like that, and we're going to say equals to df fill na, we'll grab the who again, so the who, we'll go over here dot fill na, we'll say df fill na the who, and we'll grab the mean for this column, right? So all I'm doing is grabbing the mean for the who column, right? You can see if I really wanted to do that, just go over here and that over here, right? That's the mean. So we're filling now dynamically with the mean, right? So that grabs the mean from the table. It's going to fill the NA specifically to the who column, right? And we're just assigning that over there. Another way that you could do this, again, is the median. So we'll just do the median for all them whiches. So we'll go over here and say all them whiches. All them whiches, like that. So we'll just go into each of these like that. We'll grab median. All right, and yeah, so now we can take a look at df filled NA, and all values are there, right? The who has the mean, which we said was 33.5. All them whiches has the median, right? And in this case, it's going to be 2200, right? 1528, and in the middle, it's going to be 2200. All right, so now we're going to go into example number 19. This interpolation. So we'll say example 19. And also what I will mention is our next example is going to build off of this based around backwards or forward fills. So I'll show you what's specifically going to happen. So again, we'll just say df interpolated equals df interpolate. We'll use a method for linear. So method equals a linear. And we're going to do this on rows. So I'll say axis equals 0. Grab that. And just to show you what happens, check it out. So it only filled in one value, right? And the reason why is it takes a look at our second value right here, 25,000, our fourth value over here. And then the third value is in between them, right? Because we're using a linear approach. But we don't have values earlier for 0 on the index, right? Which I showed you was an issue a little bit earlier, right? So interpolation, right, takes this value, and then it's the middle value, right? In this case, when it is linear. But we don't have anything over there. So this goes back into what I mentioned. We need to use our backwards or forward fill. So let's take a look at example 20 with this. And we'll say interpolation with fill. So all you got to do is go over here, grab the same thing, right? We'll call this 2. So that, and then we'll do a backwards fill. So b fill, because we need to grab this data point, right? We can't use a forward fill. We have to use a backwards fill. So it grabs this, populates that, grabs this, populates that. So between both of them, right, you can combine them together. And just to show you what this looks like now, right, it is fully filled, right? This is the average between both of those. And then this grabs that value, this grabs that value. So we were able to approach this with interpolation as well as our backwards fill. And pretty helpful. All right, so we're going to jump into example 21 now. So we'll say example 21, which is the replace function. I'll show you a few different ways that you could use this. So let's go through that. We'll say df replaced 1 equals df replace. And what we can do is replace null values. I'll just say np.nan and then choose a value. Let's say we want to do -1, right? This doesn't make sense in the ticket capacity, so maybe we'll actually change that to 0. So let's say null and 0 on that side of things. I'm just going to make a note over here. So that way, have it for our article. This should be df replaced. All right, so now we have that. And you can see replaces the null values with specifically 0. And also, there's a way you can use replace to fix multiple values, right? So what we could do on this side of things is we'll have df replace 2. And what I'll say on that is we have to pass in a dictionary. So we have over here our dictionary. So null value, right? Let's still have that be 0. And then we'll put a comma here after. And actually this needs to be a colon. So null value 0, right? And then what we'll have next is, let's say we're going to change 5,000, and we'll say that value is 5,500. Great. So just run that, and what you'll see now is we're going to place multiple ones, right? 5,000 is now 5,500. All the null values are going to be specifically 0. So find that pretty helpful. Another way that you could replace values is through mask. So let me just scroll down to my source code, and we'll have example 22, which is mask. And we'll go through a few different ways that you could use that. So we'll say df masked 1 equals df.mask. And inside over here, we'll say df is null. And again, we'll just pass in 0. And we should get the same result as our first one we had over here with replace, right? So it just replaces all the null values with 0. And what you can do also is, in this case, right? I'll change it up a little bit. I'll say df masked 2. And let's say we want to do the opposite, right? Like, let's say we have a mask and we want anything with tickets below 0, because that should not exist, to be replaced with a null value. So you can just say np.nan, right? You can't have negative ticket sales. And ideally, right, you can't have 0. You could have 0 ticket sales, but that's not going to happen. And you can see on this side of things, we still have those null values, right? If there was a value in here that was negative, it would be replaced with the nan. But in this instance, right, there's nothing there. Another way that we could approach this is with where. So we'll go into example 23 and grab where. See over here, 23 where. And yeah, let's jump into that. So we'll say df where 1 equals df.where. And then we'll have on that side of things is df.notnull. And we'll say 0, right? So what this will do is, if I just go over here, all the null values specifically are going to be 0 now, right? So not null, right? If it's a null value, it's going to be replace it with 0. Right, 3, 2, 1. So what this does is this keeps all the values that are not null and then replaces everything else with 0. And again, you could use other logic, right? So if we wanted to df where 2, we could say any value over here is greater than 0, right? And then we could say np.nan or 0, or it doesn't really matter, right? Well, I guess it does matter depending on what context you want. This isn't going to change anything, right? So what this does is it keeps everything that is greater than 0. Also, it's going to put in that nan value. The last one I wanted to show you guys is custom logic, right? So you can say more custom logic with fill NA. We already kind of approached this, but I just wanted to expand on this a little bit, and that's why I put it towards the end. So let's just say df logic, and we'll grab the who over here. Well, first, let me just make a copy of our data frame. I actually skipped over a step. I'll say df logic equals df.copy. Just making another copy of our original data frame. We'll go over here, df logic the who, and we'll write this out, equals, and I'm just going to copy this again. We're going to use it a few times. We're going to say dot fill NA, and inside over here, we'll use the who again. And we're going to say, let's use the median, right? But now you can use an if statement in here, right? You can say if df logic the who dot median is greater than, put in value, let's say, I don't know, greater than 500, else 0, right? So you can actually add if else, right? So we say use the median if the who median is greater than 500, else it's going to be 0. Obviously, the median is going to be way greater than 500. And you can just see over here, it's going to populate the median, right? The median is in over there now. But yeah, this is pretty cool. I don't use it as often, but you do have that customization on logic if you really want to, right? Use the if else there. Use your statistics if you want to. It's probably better than just imputing it with a value unless you have a specific reason to, like I showed you with the string, right? Unknown band, that probably makes the most sense on that side of things. Ticket sales being 0, maybe not. We covered a lot in this video, so let me just recap this for you guys in a second. So what I wanted to go over and show you guys again is up first, right? We covered isnull and isna, then showed you the opposite, right? Not na and not null. Then we counted missing values, covered info, size versus value counts. Remember, count will not include null values, size will. Showed you how to filter based off of null values, just a basic example. And then also if there's multiple conditions you want to take a look at, sorting by null values, right? There's a lot of different approaches that you could do. Put it towards the top, put it at the bottom, and it doesn't even impact your data, which is really nice. Showed you how you can remove rows or columns and also the threshold logic on that side of things, right? We covered filling, again, with the specific value, filled with strings. You can see that example, forward fill, backward fill, right? Group by with a forward fill. Yeah, I did forward fill on that one. Filling in with statistics, right? Interpolation, right? The issue specific with that first row and how you can use that with a backwards fill. Then also replace function, which I don't use as often, a mask function, and then also over here with where. And lastly, just some more custom logic if you really want to expand that out. But yeah, we've covered a ton in this video, and you should have a lot of ways to approach null values now. Well, that's the end of this video. Hope you guys were able to enjoy it and learn something new about null values within DataFrames. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're uploading constantly here, 2 to 3 videos every single week as we try to build out this channel. Additionally, I have a few links down below that I think would be helpful. First, we have our Discord server as well as code from this video. And if you want any sort of mentorship, whether that's resume reviews, guidance, or help on anything else, we have that linked down below. If you want to continue this Pandas playlist, well, click right over here and check out some of the other videos on the channel.